job interview is one of the most anxiety-provoking situations most people can find themselves in, even when they go to plan. But what happens when you have your worst interview ever? Our guests share their worst interviews ever in the hope that you will take something from their mistakes to have a more successful interview outcome. Some of the stories are horrific and some are just downright embarrassing. Let's join our host, Kevin O'Reilly, the interview skills coach with over 25 years experience in the fields of coaching and recruitment. Let's welcome our guests to the show.
Today's guest is someone who proves that small businesses can be mighty and seriously misunderstood. Michelle Lestas is the executive chair of Mentup Leadup, an internationally recognized business turnaround specialist, a published author, keynote speaker, and yes, even a TEDx pro. She's helped steer struggling companies back from the brink, launched Northern Ireland's first privately owned training centre of excellence for small businesses, and travelled to 21 countries and counting, doing what she does best, helping businesses lead smarter. Michelle's got the accolades from the Investors in People Award to the biggest impact award at the Mentoring Awards 2024. But she's also got the scars from her own worst interviews. She's been on both sides of this hiring table, and she's here to share some truly eye-watering moments. Plus, plenty of wisdom for anyone trying to navigate today's job market. If you've ever panicked when asked, "Do you have any questions for us?" then this episode is for you. Michelle, you're very, very welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Kevin. That's a really lovely introduction. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, just factual. That's all it is, Michelle. It's factual and true. It might be lovely, but it's factual and true. We have met a few times, and we both met on stage as well with regards to the TEDx. But you've always impressed me each time I've met you because you're just this wealth of information around business. I don't think I've ever met anybody who knows so much about business.
It's an interesting one. I mean, I suppose over the years, look, Kevin, I've been at this 25 years plus. Hate to say that, but I have. And on that journey, I have met some absolutely fantastic people. I wouldn't change it for the world. But obviously, people at different crossroads in terms of their business journey. And I think because of that, you pick up an awful lot of interesting studies and stories. And yeah, so it's been a brilliant journey. But as you say, not without the scars on its back.
Well, this is it, isn't it? And I'd love to just delve in a little bit more about, you as a person, your business, and then we can get into some bits and pieces around the interview process from both sides of the table, of course. So tell our listeners a little bit more about who Michelle Lestas is.
Okay, so I suppose my journey in business started out when I was born, because I was born into a family that ran a business, and really and truly, without understanding what that meant until I was much older. But when I was older and look back, I realized how, like so many other things, people are born into situations or families or whatever it happens to be, and of course, you absorb that environment around you. And I absorbed that environment, and even though there was other things I wanted to do in life, ultimately, reasonably early on in my career, I came back to business, and nothing would sort of change that I wanted to set up and run my own business. And in my early 30s, that's exactly what I did. So we'll come on to it, I know, but on that journey, one of the things that particularly frustrated me was the fact that a lot of my work was with small businesses. And what really frustrated me was that we were treating all small business owners exactly the same. We were assuming that they would lead their business in exactly the same way. So in 2021, Orphan Press in Dublin published my book on 8 different types of small business leader. And the reason I'm talking about it is, and because in there, one of the business leaders I mentioned is called the lifer. And the interesting thing about the lifer leader is that they're in business because generally they're fairly entrepreneurial, and in a way it doesn't really matter what type of business they run as long
Yeah.
as they're running a business. And with all the diagnostics and everything else that I've done around this, and I test myself in the process, I'm a lifer. So in a way, I come to the table with that thought, and all of the opportunities and challenges that that's brought with it on the way.
I think I'm a lifer also, Michelle. I cannot see myself doing anything other than what I'm doing now. And I have already pre-warned my family that I will not be retiring anytime very soon because I love what I do. Not only do I love what I do, I love the reactions I get whenever someone achieves what they want to achieve after spending some time with myself.
Yeah, and absolutely, Kevin, because one of the things, and that's just what you're saying. I mean, in a lot of ways on the journey, other people's success. Sometimes I feel that some of that is my success as well, because I
Hmm.
just really like to see people get through the crossroads of whatever crossroads they're at, getting through that and making some really informed, knowledgeable decisions, and doing them for the right reasons, making them decisions for the right reasons. And I think that's fundamentally what I'm really interested in.
And there was something, just on touching what you're saying there, that I'd recently heard, and I think it was from Jim Rohn, who'd said, if you help other people get what they want, you will get what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, I met a business person, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago, and I haven't forgotten the conversation since, because they talked about the need to share and give, and that in itself brings its returns. And I think when you have business people, and I think sometimes business owners and entrepreneurs sometimes get poor press in some
Mm.
respects, and I think when you have, I have met an awful lot of caring and sharing business owners,
Hmm.
and ones that have really put back, paid forward, whatever way you want to talk about it. And they've succeeded in their own right too. And I think that's just fantastic. The more we see of that, the more our economy is going to churn, the more there's room for our younger generation coming
Hmm.
through, our younger leaders coming through, and the opportunities that they're going to gain because of, in a way, some of the paths that we've set for them.
Yeah, and I suppose it as well, when we talk about success, it depends on your valuation of success. What does success look like to you? It could be that it's that philanthropy of giving back. And that's where they get their success from. Being able to live comfortably, financially comfortably, to be able to give back, even if it's time. And I find that with a lot of the business owners that I work with, they're exactly those type of people. Some of them actually give a couple of hours a week to charitable organizations because they can do that now. And it's filling them, internally filling them and satisfying them that way.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's one of the things I do delve into a little bit in that 8 types of business leader. I do think you're quite right. I think that definition of success is also impacted by the perspective of where they're coming from, what type of leader they actually are. And it does differ from leader to one type of leader to the other. If you take, I talk a little bit, about the descendant, the person coming into the family business. Their definition of success is probably more likely to be about the succession of the business that they take on, its survival, perhaps even its growth during their tenure of
Mm,
holding on to it. Whereas for someone else, like the hobbyist, someone who's really all about their craft and industry, for them, their success might be actually the fact that other people enjoy the things that they make.
yeah,
So you're absolutely right. Success in business is actually quite different for different leaders as well.
yeah. And just where we're on the subject of entrepreneurs and business owners, and we try and tie this back to interviews. And I don't know if you've ever looked at this as a perspective that as business owners, as both you and I are, we're always being interviewed. Every time we network, we're being interviewed and we are interviewing potential clients, potential business acquaintances. And it's just that perspective that people don't have. And it's whenever small business owners or business owners think, oh, well, I don't need to prepare for interviews because I don't have any. Well, every interaction is an interview if someone's asking a question. If someone is looking for something from you or to give to you, that is an interview.
And actually, Kevin, that's a really interesting point when it comes to when you talk about, networking, for example, going into a room and networking, because quite often some really busy business people will say, well, I just don't have the time for that. That really is not something I can do. I'm too busy doing what I'm doing. But you're absolutely right, because maybe they are too busy to just be going into a room to see what falls out. When in fact, when we talk about active networking, actively going into it, you wouldn't go into an interview without preparing for that interview. Or if you
Nope.
do, are you really serious about succeeding? In the same way, I quite often say to businesses when they're networking, they need to think about what it is they're trying to do, what results are they trying to achieve, and what can they offer, and what are they looking to take away. And absolutely, I totally agree with you. I haven't actually thought about it in the context of being interviewed and interviewing, but I think that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, and I would do quite a bit of networking myself, and I think that's how you and I first initially met. We were at an event where we were networking, and I think you pulled up a seat beside me. It was the only seat left, and
That's
and we
right.
got and we got chatting, and we got
Mhm,
chatting,
mhm,
and but that's it, isn't it? It is that process of giving and taking and listening and communicating. And it was a previous conversation I was having with a client around. He felt that he talked for an hour in his interview, but didn't communicate at all.
mm,
And I said, "You're absolutely right. That's exactly what happens. People are really, really good at talking, but that's not communicating. Communicating is communicating to be understood,
mhm,
so that both parties are on the same level of understanding, and each person knows what the other person needs and wants.
mhm.
That's
Yeah.
communication."
And the hugely important part of it, which is listening.
Oh, huge.
Yeah.
Huge. And Michelle, I don't think you may be surprised, but I'm sure some of the audience might be surprised that if you give people an opportunity to speak, they normally will take it. And what I mean by that is if you are actively listening and not just glazed eyed and not talking or waiting for your turn to talk, if you're actively listening, people will tell you almost anything. You just have to be quiet and listen. But listen. Not just wait to talk. Wait till your turn to talk. It's a
Yeah.
real tough skill.
Yeah. And of course, listening is also, it's about what you're hearing, but it's also what people are saying with their body,
Mm-hmm.
with their, their non-verbal, what's
Yeah.
going on there. Because sometimes people can be saying one thing, but actually the nuances, and as an interviewer,
Mm.
Kevin, as well as I do, you pick that up. And those nuances of, yeah, they're saying one thing, but actually what's going on here, because the non-verbals are saying something else.
Yeah. Well, but it is true what they say that we can lie with our tongue, but we can't lie with our body.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
very difficult for us to do that.
Mhm.
It's easy for us to say it, but it's very difficult for us as within our body to do it. Now we can, and actors and actresses do it every day, but they train to do that.
Mhm.
They spend lots of time crafting their skill so it looks natural. Whereas the normal Joe blogs in the street like you and I, we can be caught out very quickly and very easily by a micro expression of a lip or a touch of a nose or an uncomfortable shuffle of the feet. And it's a lot of these things that when I'm interviewing and when I'm working with clients, I don't just listen to what they say, I look at what they say. And lots of people don't get that when I say that. And what I mean by that is it's that non-verbal communication.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Does the words match the body language? If not, we pick up on that subconsciously. We mightn't always have the understanding of how to communicate that verbally to ourselves, but do you ever get one of those moments where you feel like there's something there and you go in the stomach and you go, there's something just not right about that person. I'm not sure what it is. I just can't put my finger on it. Well, that's you. That's your subconscious that has seen something that has happened in the past and is warning you, but it doesn't have the language to tell you what it is.
I mean, we talk about a gut feeling, a gut reaction, and at the end of the day, we don't live our lives with just gut reactions, and we'll probably be foolish in some ways to do that. However, it definitely, and certainly in my career and in my choices, I definitely feel that that gut reaction has sometimes saved me in terms of some of the decisions I've made. And listening to it and being aware of it, I often say, look, we live in Northern Ireland. We're surrounded by landscape, scenery, blue flag beaches, all of those beautiful things around nature. And I'll often say to some of the most stressed business people I work with and to myself, some of the best thinking I do is when I just go for a walk on the beach.
Yeah.
And I was taught that really early on in my career by a very, very seasoned business leader at the time. And I was pretty young in my career. And anyway, I was working with this person and we were in, I suppose we were in a board meeting, and it had clearly, the discussions had gone on for a couple of hours, 3 hours, whatever it was. People were getting tired, people were getting hungry. We hadn't actually really got anywhere. And he just turned around and said, okay, we're taking a break. Everybody out, everybody outside, everybody in the fresh air. Your task now is to go for a walk. I don't want to see you for another hour. And that's what happened. We came back into the room, and within the hour, we were able to reach some sort of an agreement and a decision and a way forward. So, gut reactions, listening to them, taking the space to listen to them. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And my happy place is the forest. I have recently only realized that green is my calming color. So out in the forest, when it's in the greenery or surrounded by trees, that's where I can focus and concentrate on my business, and that's where I create my services and packages and create my businesses and create the different ways I'm going to work. Even when I'm practicing my public speaking and my speeches, I will go into a forest and I will stand there like some mad lunatic and talk my speech out loud, and then people will walk past and look at me and I just nod and I'll continue because, well, I'm going to be speaking in public anyway. It makes no difference.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's that comfort. I don't, and I know I'm sure there's plenty of studies out there to show why that is important to us, but it has taken me quite a few years to realize that that green, that foliage almost, it's almost like a hug, something comforting about it and safe about it, where I feel safe and comfortable. But it focuses my mind.
Yeah. I think we're people, and nature and those natural things are actually quite important to us. And it's not always the best thing to just keep battling, put the head down, keep battling with the same problem. As Einstein says, the mark of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Sometimes
Indeed.
we just have to break that pattern, and we just have to think outside the box a little bit and give ourselves the space to do that. I think it works.
Absolutely. And I think this is a really good point to make with regards to even the interview preparation. Sometimes we can get so bogged down in the preparation of preparing for an interview that we can stress ourselves out a lot. and maybe taking a walk for half an hour, just to get the blood pumping through the system again, get some fresh air into the lungs. That normally resets the clock. That normally gives us that little bit of an energy boost, or it puts things into perspective a little. And I would
Yeah.
always recommend that as well, Michelle, to my own clients around, what is it you enjoy? Where do you enjoy? Where do you feel that you're so comfortable that it doesn't matter? Is it walking through a forest? Is it walking on a beach? Is it walking through a field? Is it walking through Belfast city centre with all the background noise that you can focus? Because some people need the noise to actually drown out their thoughts. So it's whatever works for you. Do more of it.
Absolutely.
Do more of it. Now, Michelle, let's touch on your previous journey before you started your own business, and you would have been working for other organizations at that time. You would have had to apply, then sit an interview, and then go through probation potentially to hold that position. Talk us through some of those interviews that you've had.
Yeah. Honestly, some of them feel like they were yesterday. I have a really good recall of those interviews. And I think I've always challenged myself in my career. I'm just one of those people that whether that's that entrepreneurial background again. And I think sometimes if you look at a typical entrepreneur in the early part of their career, when they are actually maybe working for others, there's definitely a pattern there, because you can see that person moving around reasonably quickly. And I did do that. But every time I moved, I was looking to move to a higher level. So there was always a level of, probably, to be fair, dissatisfaction in working for others. And that would be probably, I'm pretty self-aware, so I'd understand that that's part of the course in terms of that life or leadership we talked about earlier. So anyway, so they do stand out in terms of the interviews. What I do know, what was really significant in me feeling comfortable, because remember, every time I was stretching myself, so every interview I went for, I was going for something that was more than what I was already doing. And that brought with it its own stresses and strains. But the thing that really worked for me, and I would give this advice to anyone, is preparation, preparation, preparation. If you walk into an interview situation and you feel prepared, you are as armed as you can be. You are putting as the best foot forward that you can. You are putting yourself in the best position you can. Now, whatever the outcome or decision around that, at least you're walking away. And that was always really important to me, that I would walk away and feel I did my absolute utmost for that. And sitting on the other side, sitting on the panel side and having interviewed a number of people over the years, I look for that straight away. Because in a way, rightly or wrongly, if an interviewee has not prepared properly, and I know we'll probably talk about what that means, but if they haven't prepared properly, it comes across. And then as a potential employer, I'm thinking, well, if you haven't taken the time to do that, how serious are you about working for us? So there's two sides to that coin. But for me, on a personal level, when I was younger, it was all about feeling that I wanted to do the best I could. And that was really important. So preparation. And so those interviews, there was always different stages, normally there was some sort of an assessment centres, there was psychometric testing, or there was group projects. Then there was a presentation as part of the interview. Then there was the questioning part of the interview. So that all of them, even at that point in time, there was usually a 3-stage process, or at least a two-stage process. in the interview process. So you were getting prepared for all of that in one go.
It certainly weeds out the people who really don't want to be there, doesn't it? When you put in those stages along the way, because you're right, it is about that preparation. And some people will stop at the first hurdle and go, this is not for me. And they're right. It isn't for them, because they probably wouldn't succeed if they didn't even bother to go for the 3 different stages and prepare properly for those. And it was somebody else I had on this podcast recently who made a lovely quote, and I thought, oh, that sums it up in a nutshell. It says, what makes you stand out in your interview is what you do before your interview. And I thought, not a truer phrase has been said. And again,
Yeah.
that also can be taken into the business world with regards to networking. That can be taken into the business world in regards to pitching, preparing for a pitch, investor pitches. What you do behind the scenes is what you'll be rewarded for up front. And
Totally.
people don't really see that either behind the scenes. And it is that preparation where you're sitting in the house on your own preparing for an interview, that for a job that you really want. But you had touched on something that is good and strange at the same time. You'd said that you always went for positions that were higher than potentially where you currently were. Now, you didn't mention if you met every criteria to go for that role. Did you meet the criteria, or were you a few short?
Yeah. No, that was always the thing that I looked for. And that brings you into the job description, because the other thing, yeah, you don't want to waste your time. If you're not meeting the criteria, the essential criteria, now, the desirable criteria is a different thing, because I always felt that that was negotiable. But in terms of the essential criteria, I only went for jobs where I met that.
Okay.
But
Well,
it's interesting, that split. That split is interesting, because if you're meeting the essential criteria, essentially you can do the job, which is why it's there. But that desirable criteria is really where you start to punch in, and where you really start to focus on, here's the added value. If you take me, here's the added value, because I meet certain parts of the desirable criteria. Because essentially, people can choose people to come for interview that only meet the essential criteria.
would it surprise you, Michelle, to know that there is a split in gender around who goes for jobs based around the criteria, and that men go for jobs if they only have 50% if they meet the criteria, but women need to have 100% of the essential criteria before they apply?
That's
Would that
interesting.
surprise you?
It does, actually. It does surprise me. And I suppose as an interviewer, I have always, in the pre-selection process in terms of applications, people always needed to meet the essential criteria before we would interview. Because I suppose that was us saying, as the employer, you need to be able to do this in order to do this job, because that's protecting me as the employer, but it's also protecting the employee, because you don't want people to be uncomfortable. You don't want them to be that out of their depth that they are really uncomfortable in their role. I think you're protecting both parties, really. But it's
Yeah.
interesting statistic. Didn't know it.
It doesn't stop them going for it. But you're probably right. You've set a standard as a business, as an organization. Plus, you've also thought about how that may affect the potential employee, which is a lovely way to look at it. It's a very holistic way of looking at it. And most people don't look at it like that. They look at it more from the business side as opposed to the business and the person side. And that's maybe why businesses you've been in, that you've been hiring for, that those people have stayed around longer than other people that others have hired, because you've treated them like human beings, and you have thought about, well, what if you've made them meet that minimum criteria? So that means that they're going to be at least comfortable enough to come in and do the very basics comfortably. So you set that standard, which is fantastic. And maybe you didn't even realize you were doing that, but that is not normal for lots of organizations.
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, employment is a two-way process, isn't it? Because there's an awful lot of investment into bringing a new employee on board. Even if it's just somebody taking time out of their working day to support, mentor, to induct, whatever you want to call it. Maybe it's people going on a training program. Maybe it's even doing an online training. Maybe it's a combination of all of those things. But whatever it is, there is an investment. And so when you start to invest in that way, you need the person to want to be there and to feel that they can do the job. And also, as the employer, you want to feel, well, we're investing in here, but we're investing because there's going to be a return. We're going to get a good return. We're going to get someone who wants to be with us and sees us as a good place to work. And so I think it is. I often think interviewees, and certainly when I was at the start of my career, it didn't occur to me in a way that I was also interviewing the organization to some extent. It didn't feel like that, I have to say, sitting on my seat.
Yeah, I'm
But
sure.
but essentially, in a way, I would encourage interviewees now to think, well, you are to some extent. You're making sure that how they operate, their values, whatever it happens to be, work for you. And I think that's really important.
Well, I think that will cut down on all of those recruitment costs and all of the hidden costs associated with it. You mentioned even mentoring. There's a hidden cost of mentoring for someone to take the time out of their work to not do their work to help you do yours. So there's a hidden cost in that, and I think the figure is, depending on the role, of course, is anything between £6,000 and £30,000. Now, I know that's quite a big range, but again, it depends on the role, it depends on the level, it depends on the business, the company, etc. But it's you're talking minimum £5,000 to £6,000, even before you
I
start.
know, I know, it's not cheap. And that's a huge investment for some small businesses, really. That's a
It would
lot of
be
money.
cheap. It's cheaper to maintain and look after the staff you have than it would be to keep re-employing or keep employing people.
Yeah.
But it's the same with customers and business. It's cheaper to hold on to a customer that you have than to find new clients and customers,
Totally. Totally.
isn't it?
And companies quite often forget about that. But
You do.
absolutely, I think actually the figure is cost 3 times more to attract a new customer than
Wow.
to retain an existing customer. So we should actually be looking after our top customers. Really important. Yeah.
I know, but
Anyway,
it's only sometimes, as you quite rightly said, some companies forget about that, and it's always the next one, the next one, the next one, and it's not, well, how can we look after and maintain what we currently have to ensure that this person stays with us for a lifetime?
yeah. Yeah.
That's where the real growth and value for clients, for me, comes in, is that, yes, I would like you for a lifetime because I'm going to provide a service that you'll never find anywhere else, and you'll get great value from it. Not only do we help people with their interview skills and help them get that job through the soft skill process, you then have to go through the 6 months probation, which, if you feel that, it's been a waste of your time going for this whole recruitment process in the first place. And then after that, what is it you want to do? Do you want to go for a promotion? Well, let's talk about that. And there's always a question that you don't feel that you can really ask within your workplace or to people within the workplace. Sometimes you need an outside perspective.
Yeah. And I think the other message around that's important is, and even for people starting out early career, I think it's about also understanding your value. I think that's a really important thing to think about as an interviewee. And I always say, and I've had probably more recently than before, but I've definitely had a few different young leaders just ask me a few questions that are going for interviews. And one of the things I always say to them is, the reason that you're in an interview in the first place is because whatever paper evidence that potential employer has of you, they feel that you can do the job. They feel that you are appropriate to interview. They're only interviewing you because they want to rule you in or out. It's not that you can't do the job. And I think, particularly for younger people starting out, getting that sense of their own value and what they might bring to the table is important. I know it's not easy. It's not easy at all because they don't have the experience. Obviously, as time goes on, the more experience you can pull on, it's easier sometimes to answer questions when you have more experience to pull on it and when you're starting out in your career. So you're always trying to, when I think back to those early interviews, I was always pulling experiences from other parts of my life and applying it to how it would work in the work situation. So when you don't have all that work experience to pull on, you're thinking about, okay, what is the wider experience here that I have that's applicable, that I can talk about, and
Absolutely.
not to get stumped basically in a question.
I totally agree with that, because you're right. When you're first starting out, you don't have those experiences in that business context. So you're going to have to try and make associations with the wider life that you have and pull that back into how will that benefit this organization. And one of those very simple ways would be volunteering.
Mhm.
If you're going to volunteer, work for free, then to me, you sound like someone that I would like working for me. You sound like someone who is willing to go above and beyond. And it's not just about the money. Now, listen, it is about the money. We have to live, we have to eat, we have a lifestyle that we like to have. However, some people do it for the love, and the love creates the money.
Yeah, and the thing is as well then is the important thing is about how you put across the relevance of that experience, so
Mhm.
making sure that when you're asked questions that you are, and those questions can be phrased, how would you or how did you? And so they could be hypothetical in terms of how would you, or they can be asking how did you do this, because this is part of what you need to do here. And so, but in both of those questions, you're basically able to say, well, I would do it this way because this is how I did it before.
Mm.
Or if you were saying, how did you do it? You're saying, well, I did it this way because, and here's the reasons why, and here were the results. That's another thing that I think is really important when you're being interviewed, is when you're asked about and you're giving an answer. Quite often the thing that's forgotten by an interviewee is to say, and this was the outcome. This was the result. Employers like to know that there's a result at the end of a particular situation or a task or whatever it happens to be. And I think that results is quite important to get across.
Yeah, let's be honest. We are results based. We ask for you to do a task to give us an outcome, which is a result, and hopefully the result is positive. So yes, absolutely, we should be telling the result in every interview, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, because it may not be insignificant. It may feel like an insignificancy to you, but to them, it might actually be quite a big thing. So it's just picking up on those small details. Now, Michelle, what we're going to do is we're going to change a little bit of pace. And for all our listeners out
I don't
there,
like the sound of that, Kevin.
and for all our listeners out there, what we do now is we ask a barrage of questions to Michelle one at a time, and all Michelle is allowed to say is yes, no, or pass.
Okay.
Michelle, are
Oh,
you
I
ready?
can't say pass if I want
Oh,
to.
yes, of course, yes. Yes, no, and pass.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, is it acceptable to wear pajama bottoms to a Zoom interview?
Yes.
Is it okay to bribe the interviewer?
No.
Is it wise to ask the interviewer for a selfie together at the end?
No.
Should a candidate smile during the interview?
Absolutely. Yes.
Should you answer the first question with a dramatic Pause for effect.
Pass.
Should women wear high heels to an interview?
Does it have to be yes or no?
Yes, no, or pass?
Yes. Why not?
Is it acceptable to ask the interviewer how much you make?
No.
Should you high five the interviewer at the end?
No.
Should a candidate swear during an interview?
No.
And is it acceptable to bring your mum along for moral support?
Outside the room, yes.
Well, Michelle, that's the end of the interrogation. Sorry, I mean the questions. How
That
did you
wasn't
find
too bad.
those?
Oh, I just wanted to give longer answers, but yeah, that's me. I thought the high heels was a really meaty question because
What do you mean? I was going to ask what do you mean by that. Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think how people dress for an interview is important,
Mm-hmm.
but the importance around it is that how we dress gives us confidence. You know, if we have an old jacket that we've worn for 10 years, but every time we wear it, we feel confident in that jacket, then I would say that's the jacket to wear to your interview. It's about how confident your clothes make you feel. If you are in high heels and that makes you confident, go for it, because that will come across. And that's far more important, I think, than whether or not the interviewer likes high heels. You know, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you're going for a job and that they want to see confidence, not arrogance, confidence, very different.
Mm-hmm.
Proper deep-seated confidence. So I think why not wear high heels if that's how you feel about it?
Do you think it might be industry specific though, where it's almost there's an expectation around wearing a certain outfit, and I don't just mean high heels for women. I mean ties and shirts and suits for men.
Yes, there is. I know, I think you're absolutely right. And the thing is, if you're going for an interview in that industry, then obviously you want to work in that industry. And
Mm.
obviously you're going to feel reasonably confident wearing the unwritten uniform of that industry. That's part of the package. And there's plenty of industries like that. Um, I think COVID certainly changed it a lot.
Mm.
I don't know what you were like, Kevin, but I remember after COVID going to a conference, maybe about 6 months after we'd all been unlocked, and I looked around the room and I went, this is just so different to what it
Mm-hmm.
was when I left this arena. How people are dressing is just so different. And so I think, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And there's certain situations when I'm working in particular situations where I'm going to dress accordingly. Even if it's not an interview, I'm still going to dress accordingly, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not going
And,
to turn up in my pajama bottoms when I'm actually going to a proper meeting.
the reason I ask these questions is because I'm asked these questions regularly.
Mm.
I am. I'm asked these questions regularly. And it is always lovely to find a different viewpoint and a different perspective on the answers. Because when I ask this question, which I do quite often in a workshop scenario, it divides the room firstly by gender, and majority of the men don't answer. And then it divides the women, the for and the against. And it's quite a heated debate. It's almost like I pulled the pin on a hand grenade and just left it in the center of the room and went, let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And right enough, the opinions within the room at that time are complete polar opposites, but they're both right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And because the other thing I read into some of your quickfire questions was this, and obviously if you're being asked the questions, is this sort of question around how formal stroke informal should you be in an interview with your language, with your high-fiving, with your selfies. You know, I think interviews are still a reasonably formal process.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reasonably again, perhaps, in a young company where it's all very, and I stress the young company, not necessarily young people, but if the company is young and there's maybe, a much more casual ethos, having a high five at the end of the interview. If the interviewer comes forward with that, go for it. But if it's initiated by the interviewee, I think it's a bit risky.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely. I would agree with that. Okay. I enjoyed that, Michelle. I enjoyed that thought process, and for those that couldn't see Michelle or are not watching this online, the struggle in her face trying not to answer a complete answer and just give a yes, no, or a maybe. It was difficult, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's not my world, Kevin. There's always a discussion or a debate.
But it's the reason we do that. It's the reason we do
Yeah,
it. But not that I like to put you
brilliant.
through the struggle, Michelle, but it's good to see that this is the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay. And it's hard to, like we said earlier, it's easy to lie with the tongue, harder to lie with the body.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Now, we're at the point of this interview where I want to hand it over to you. And I want you to tell all of the listeners about your worst interview ever. So, Michelle, over to you.
Yeah. My worst interview was, well, it was my frame of mind, I think, because I'd applied to a particular company a couple of times, been rejected. And on the third application, a couple of years, so we were probably talking maybe 14 months later, I applied again, and this time I did get the interview. So of course I was going with a lot of, negative thinking going through my head, a lot of negative voice going through my head because I'd already been in this difficult situation. Then I walked through and there was somebody on the panel that I knew. So they hadn't obviously declared to me they were going to be in the panel. So again, that was sort of throwing me. So it was really about the mantra that was going on in my head that was creating this really difficult interview. So for the first 2 or 3 questions, I was sort of in this position where I was half listening to the question, really nervous about what my answers were going to be. And then whatever it was, third question, and I thought, I'm here. If I don't take some sort of control over this process for myself, I'm going to really regret it because I clearly really wanted to work for the company. So then I got into my mantra. And I had to really sort of ignore the person I knew, not literally ignore them, but ignore the fact that I knew them and begin to think, well, actually, maybe that's a positive thing. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. So it took time to get into it. And yet I really wanted the position. So I would say that that was probably my biggest nightmare. And then, as I've always said, the worst question for me in an interview is when the panel say, have you a question for us? And of course, you have to have a question for them. But then it's gauging what that question should be. Should it be about the role? Should it be about the company? Should it be? And I've heard some really wacky questions when that one is
Michelle, share
asked.
one with us. Share one with us.
One of them was, what type of coffee do you have in the organization? And I was thinking on the panel, do I know what type of coffee we have? I'm not a prolific coffee drinker anyway. And I thought, I'm not sure I know the answer to this question. So I gave that answer and said, I'm actually not quite sure, but what I'm really interested in is why you want to know. So I pushed it back to the interviewee. And then it came across them because they were into sustainability and fair trade and those type of things. And they wanted to know that our coffee reflected our values, which I completely understood and completely got. And actually, when I got that explanation, I thought, that's a pretty good question. That's a pretty cool
That's an
question.
excellent question. I'm going
That's
to
what
put that
I
on the
thought.
list. I'm going to put that on my list. What he had done or she had done there is took you out of the interviewing mode. So when you're in the interviewing mode, you're asking questions, then you're listening. You're not actually really thinking to an extent. But when they pushed a question that made you ask another question to clarify, it shifted you into a different mindset. Then you were engaged and you were present in that moment with that person. And you remembering that person now proves that that works. Okay? So what I would always get people to ask at the very end is, can you tell me what it is about this company that you love?
For more details about our guest, or if you would like to be a guest, go to www.interviewskillscoach.co.uk/my-worst-interview-ever, or find us on Facebook or LinkedIn. And remember, on the other side of a successful interview is the life you deserve.